forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa, you can make us see it your way. No way, gasoline and propane, more flames. Oh no, no more snowflakes.
We can all get along, but there's no stopping. Ay, everybody's wrong, that's the real problem. Ay, they don't want to hear it, but they still talking. Ay, soon enough, we running out of options. Ay, this ain't gonna end till it's in the coffin. Ay, we ain't gonna be friends till we try to squash it. Ay, I don't know how we can make amends or we drop it. Snowflakes melt when it's hot, kid.
Y'all are so fake. Oh no, the forecast said that there'd be snowflakes. Whoa, you can make us see it your way. No way, gasoline and propane, more flames. Oh no, no more snowflakes.
And Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to HeartMind Expressions.
Yeah.
It's going to, Amária is going to be unavailable today. She's dealing with personal problems at the moment, and we hope that she is safe with what she's dealing with. And
Dr. Bloom is also out as well. So,
Bloom is on assignment.
Yep. So, our last show was a year ago.
Oh gosh, here we gonna go. It's the beginning of January, and everyone's gonna be like, "Hey, it's been a year since I saw you."
Well, our last show was last year, so
yeah, true.
Prove me wrong. Yeah, there you go. Change my mind.
Well, okay, we got ourselves a very interesting conversations this week. So here's a few of the rundown of some of the things we're going to be hitting. We're going to be talking about the most recent judgment when it came to the FDA and how they are supposed to be disclosing their documentation. We're also going to be touching on what happened recently in Kazakhstan and how that actually has a very interesting history with the country itself. And then on top of that, we're also going to be talking a little bit about what happened with the Supreme Court today. And we'll probably have a nice smattering of a whole bunch of other topics and just a bunch of other fun conversation and banter for the next hour or so. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hello, Sue.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, I'm just dandy.
How'd you do for the New Year so far? Are you surviving?
I'm still intact as far as can be. With all the fun stuff that's going on these days, it's always lucky to be another day alive, breathing fresh air.
I think they're calling it. A challenge now. Like every morning you wake up and I'm saying, "Gotta live for today. Challenge accepted."
Every time you wake up, it's like damage report. What happened?
You still have all your limbs. At least that's the nice thing about it. At least none of the C-19 symptoms is loss of limbs so far. At least I haven't heard anyway.
I don't think that exactly would be front page news. Actually, no, it probably would be, except how exactly would you describe it to somebody without causing undue panic? It'd be like one of those commercials where it's like symptoms would include loss of limbs, heart palpitations, incontinence, amongst others. And then you say, like, wait a minute, what was that first thing?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times one of the symptoms they say is death. And people still don't go, well, wait a minute, what?
What? and usually what's the funny thing about these things is that the symptoms are worse than the thing that they're treating.
Yeah. And yet they want to take this thing for it,
It's like, oh, here I am just taking this medicine for IBS, and I can potentially have a plethora of different side effects. That's fun. Anyways, so I want to just quickly jump into the recent news that has to do with the FDA real quickly. This actually just came out earlier this morning. Actually, I think it was in the middle of the afternoon, to be honest, accurate. But if you remember recently, we had the FDA recently go to the courts and ask to allow for a 75-year time frame to release all the information that had to do with uh, these genetic therapies that they're releasing right now. And the reason why they wanted that was because of the fact that they had a FOIA request pressed upon them, and you have to release information that is part of this FOIA request. And for people who are not familiar what a FOIA request is, FOIA is an acronym standing for Freedom of Information Act. It is a way for accountability for the federal government towards citizens or companies or other practices that wish to find more information that's publicly available. It's meant to keep people accountable. So the request was for the 75 years to release all their paperwork for this, and that would have, if that would have been the case, they would be releasing, I think it was 550 pages every year for 75 years. But a judge today ruled against the FDA when it came to the release of this data, and they have to release everything this year, every single page.
That's a lot of documents, but hey, I welcome it.
So instead of it being 550 pages of documents every year, we're going to be dumped with over 40,000 pages of documents in 1 year. Over 40,000 pages. That is immense. And I think it's going to be very interesting how this information is going to be used. I mean, if you remember, if you're around during the 70s and they had swine flu, and what they were doing with that, they only took, I think it was less than 80 people actually had who died from that particular thing, and then they pulled they pulled the shot from the market. So I'm very, very curious about what this is going to do. So
now keep in mind, though, the FDA stands for the Food and Drug Administration. I don't know if you want to tell everybody why those two had to be connected.
There's a lot of drugs and foods, and a lot of food and drugs.
There you go.
I mean, I like the idea of let your food be your medicine and your medicine your food.
Yeah,
but not exactly the way it's nowadays conventionally done. I like the idea of actually using, like, vegetables and fruits and herbs for medicinal reasons more than just food.
But lately, within the last, what are we talking? Ever since they really started it out, I mean, they've been actually poisoned.
It'd be like the last 100 years when they started going from like more holistic into more allopathic medicine. That would be when the Rockefellers really took over a lot of things.
Yeah,
and that's a whole story and conversation on its own.
Right,
So,
but I want everybody to understand, that keep in mind that these things are together, and and it's just that when they make one side food, for example, to go downhill, they're going to make the drugs go downhill, and vice versa. It's a thing.
True, very true.
They both roll together, literally down the hill.
Birds of was it? Bird of the flock. Birds of the same flock fly the same. Something like that.
Birds of the feather.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
I'm not very good with some of those. So,
So what do you think some of this stuff will contain in these
well, I mean,
thousands of
I mean, from the stuff that we already have, we have a long list of negative reactions and side effects, amongst other data that is just damning already. I think we only have less than 1,000 pages at this point, and the stuff that we have right now is just it's jaw dropping. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
would
people
imagine
have
that.
been working for these people that has built it, made it, put it together, and they have tried to be whistleblowers and tell us what is in this stuff, what is going on with all this stuff, what is going on with, the sickness and everything else. These people have been telling us, and there usually isn't always data to completely back it up, but now we'll have that chance.
Well, we'll have the actual uh, stuff from. We'll actually have the data from the horse's mouth itself, which is going
Yes.
to be a lot easier for people who are not very well uh, familiar with a lot of the inner workings of things. They'll have that data
Well,
right
yeah, and
there.
also be like people, they'll still say, well, you can find anything from the internet, it's like this is from the people. And you say, well, you find everything from the internet with no actual proof. Exactly what do you want proof to look like? It seems like the only proof that the people will accept is it comes from mainstream media with clip outs and cutouts of articles during the news segments. I'm sorry for those who watch mainstream media, you're rarely ever going to get that. Not the truth,
I also,
anyway.
I like to apologize. Card catalogs are not very common anymore, too. A lot of searches are done online. It's a very common media these days. Uh, so I think there's going to be a lot more with that coming up in the near future because a lot of it hasn't been finished yet. Moving on to the other thing that's related to this, and that was the Supreme Court that happened uh, today. And they heard the argument that had to do with the OSHA regulation that they're trying to put forward. Now, I only heard a fraction of what was going on. About 45 minutes. This went out for several hours, and from at least the way I didn't actually have a very positive outlook on this. But you know what? Things have surprised me in the past. Essentially, what they're arguing right now, and there were actually several cases that kind of jammed everything together. The first one was if OSHA could do things in regards to the um, the was it the jab or mask test type of look situation for workplaces with over 100 employees. The second thing that they were dealing with is if Medicare, Medicaid can affect people who are on those things in the same way. And there was a third one that was part of it, I remember, if I remember correctly. But essentially, it's can the government dictate something that you can use, right? Basically, if the government can say, "Hey, we want you to do this for your workplace," or here, since you're on this program, you have to do these things. Essentially, that was what's going on, and strong arguments on both sides. And you could definitely tell where people's opinions were on these things. You know what there's Sue?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to type something up here. It's not cooperating.
No, no problem. So on the Supreme Court, obviously we have the 9 justices. We had uh, we have the Chief Justice, which would be John Roberts. You have Clarence Thomas, Associate Judge. You have Associate Judge, Justice, excuse me, Alito, Breyer, Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Kagan, and Sotomayor. And usually when we have this split now, because ever since RBG passed away, that dynamic drastically changed. Because usually what would happen would be that Roberts would be the tie-breaking vote when it came to these, because usually it was Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Thomas, and Alito were normally on the one side, and Kagan, Sotomayor, RBG, and Breyer were on the other. And so you would have a 4-4 split, and Roberts would normally be that tiebreaker. With Justice Cody Barrett now on the bench, RBG is out of the picture. So now you went from a 4-4 split to a 5-3 majority. So even if Roberts were to go on to the side that had Kagan and Sotomayor, that would still be 5-4 versus it being, it'd be 5-4 versus it being I'm getting my numbers wrong. Yeah, it would be 5-4 versus it being 4 and then another 4 split. 3-4, maybe 3 justices, then Roberts would be 4 and then 5. Excuse me. So it just should be very interesting with how this now turns out.
You okay, right?
Oh, I'm just standing.
Okay, I just didn't want you to strain yourself. I know how hard it is to fit through those little holes.
No, I had to recall the justices and how they usually land on a lot of these things. This should be extremely interesting because this is the first major landmark case that Justice Barrett will be part of. Coney Barrett will be part of. It will really show how this new Supreme Court, or at least this new layout, is going to adjudicate on things.
Well, they have to carve a pathway somehow and sometime. So, as time is any, good as way as any.
Well, we're now seeing workplaces addressing this issue now, since there is no current stay on things, and a stay would be very useful because it would make it that
well, when they show that one side comes up with this sort of information, then they're going to have to also look, is it happening in other places as well?
Exactly. And one of the few things that were happening when this whole thing was going on is that you had several solicitor generals of different states. And one of the things that they were saying was basically, we already have rules on the books in our states, and this is just going to override what we're doing. So it's once again a states' rights situation, and it's also, does the federal government have the right to do these things type of situation. So it's going to be hotly popular and unpopular at the exact same time.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
So we'll see exactly how that turns out.
Yeah, that one's then when you talk about justice, see, the thing is, of any kind of justice whatsoever, we are so used to seeing everything happen quickly that when you see a real case, real investigation, real everything that has to do with the law, that takes a long time. So you're going to be seeing a lot of people going, when are you guys going to have the answers? When are you going to have the results? And it's going to simply take a while. You have to be patient. They taught us on TV, like Law and Order, and they can get this stuff solved within a couple of days and things like that. That's not how it normally works, and we know that the swamp, they will stand there and have information within hours. So we're used to that, and we're not used to seeing how real investigations are done. And so it's just something that society is going to have to adjust to, because there's going to be more and more of that everywhere, all across the board, on all sorts of subjects.
Of course, definitely, 100%. I think right now is going to be very interesting, particularly when it comes to this, this is actually being done, and this is what would be considered expedited. They are speeding this up as fast as they possibly can. But since it's the entire country, and the we're dealing with a regulatory commission, this is going to affect everybody. So, it may seem like it's taking a bit of time, but it's actually going very fast when it comes to how courts work. Because sometimes courts can take months, if not years. This has taken probably only a few weeks. So,
Do you think it's also time sensitive due to, how the office is changing? Like people are dropping out, people are coming in, and, who
this
maybe
is
possible future elected officials. So they're trying to cram things in or something. And I'm talking about the bad guys when they try to do their so-called justice.
I think this is time sensitive because this order takes effect on February 9th.
Okay.
So if, let's say, the justices finish their deliberations before the end of the month, we could potentially see a completely different scenario come February 1st.
Okay.
But, once again, takes time. It's not exactly like 24 or Boston Legal or Law and Order. There's a process and there's a way to get things done, and
Well, they want it to be airtight as well.
Of course,
whatever they do, they
yes,
have to have
exactly.
documents. They have to have a way to back everything up. They just can't talk out of thin air.
Exactly. That's why everybody has. If you listen to some of these things, that's the wonderful thing about the Supreme Court. I understand you don't have video, but at least you have an audio, and you can listen to it. You can listen in on this, so you can listen to what the court's saying, how the different sides are arguing this particular thing. So there's actually more transparency with the Supreme Court than there is in federal court, surprisingly. Because usually when it comes to federal court, when we had like the Ghislaine Maxwell case or the Jussie Smollett case, you had to call in to listen into this thing. There was no website where you could just press a button and there it is.
Yeah.
At least the Supreme Court has their own website where you can listen in to a court case that's happening. And actually, a lot of places were actually streaming this on YouTube or Rumble or even Facebook. They were all streaming this stuff.
Yeah. So if you don't have a chance to listen to it then and there while it's going, you can always go back and listen to it later, especially on Rumble.
Exactly. Platforms, you can, pause it, rewind, fast forward. That's just the wonderful thing about the medium.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now. Moving on. Shall we talk about Kazakhstan? I think that's going to be very interesting to talk about.
Why don't you give everybody a little bit of a background to step on for that?
All right. So I find the topic of Kazakhstan to be very interesting, not because of what's happening right now, but because of what's happened, what the history of Kazakhstan, not within the course of history. Now, there is a little bit of folklore when it comes into how everything is understood. Now, that'll make more sense in a moment. Okay. But let's first talk about what's going on right now. Essentially, what's going on is that the people have gotten sick and tired of government mandates, government rules or regulations when it comes to what they're dealing with their pandemic response. And they have said, you're not going to do that stuff anymore. So, of course, the mainstream media will say, well, it's because of high gas prices. Where have you heard that one before? If you guys remember,
everything was
France,
by high gas prices, even when
it's
we
always
were
high.
at war. Yeah.
Yeah. They said, remember with France and how they said the reason why they were protesting with France is because of high gas prices last year or the year prior? And that's what eventually created a lot of stuff when they come to yellow vests, amongst other things. They're saying the exact same thing, but when you listen to news outlets and citizen journalists that are familiar with actually what's going on there, you have a totally different story that's going on over there. So, first of all, the entire government of Kazakhstan is in the process of resigning. So that means all administrative positions are being vacated. The presidency, their local legislatures, everything, the entire government is being upheld and they're being overhauled. On top of that, you also have the fact that they are dealing with a financial situation because Kazakhstan is one of the largest Bitcoin miners in the world. And you saw a significant tank within crypto markets as a response of what happened over there. On top of also, I think they also had oil issues and other metals and other raw materials because they have a lot of resources. It's a very resource-heavy country. So, but that's actually not one of the reasons why I'm personally fascinated with it. The reason I'm personally fascinated when it comes to a lot of these things is because Astana, which is the capital, but it's now known by a more, the current name that it should go by is called Nur Sultan, NUR-Sultan, SULTAN. And the reason why it's called Nur Sultan is because the president, the first president of Kazakhstan, changed the capital of Astana to his name. So Astana it's Nur Sultan, but it was originally called Astana, and then prior to that, it was another name. I think it's had 4 or 5 different names over the course of a few years. Actually, several centuries. Excuse me. So the interesting thing about that capital city is that if you go by things that go on the different cans and other sites, they'll talk about how it's connected to Illuminati, NWO type of situations. And that makes a lot of sense when you consider what they were planning to do with that city. Because that was a planned city. That was not a city that was just there for a while. That was a planned city. They built that city. And it was going to be the headquarters for a lot of these different things. In fact, a lot of the stuff that you see in, say, a lot of the sci-fi shows, they'll actually start presenting stuff at like conventions in Astana. That's what I'm going to call it.
Isn't that where a lot of kids go missing there anyway? Isn't it?
Yeah, they go missing there. There's a lot of symbolism of Illuminati symbolism there. They have their own White House actually in that capital city, which is there just to display. It's actually not for the president of the country. It's just there. A lot of pyramids, a lot of other symbolism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And really that goes back to the name of the country, which is Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan has to be connected to Khazarians. There have been several connections to them in the Khazars and Khazarians. And I'm not saying all people from that region are that. I'm saying that there are similar name similarities with that. So there's a whole story when it comes to the Khazarians, and that's how it's connected to Cain. So it's also connected to Russia. So it's a long story. And the Spark Notes really quick version is when you go into things like biblical times and old historical periods of times, you had a group known as the Canaanites, right? The Canaanites worshipped a god named Baal, B-A hyphen A-L. And there are two different Baals. There is just Baal, and then there's Baal-El. Baal is the father, which is another deity, which is generally considered a good deity. The other one is just Baal, and that one is known for its symbolism when it comes to human sacrifice and other forms of ritualistic sacrifice. Now, when the Canaanites existed in the Middle East during during the biblical times, they eventually were kicked out of that area, moved north into what's known as Khazaria, which would be near the Caspian and Black Seas. That was during the Middle Ages eventually. And during that time, you had a lot of different countries, nations dedicated to one particular sect of the church, right? So you have one group in the South, in the Middle East, a lot of that became Islamic. That a lot of the Middle East became Islamic during the time, while the Europe embraced Christianity. The Khazarians, realizing that they had to deal with some Abrahamic faith, still were worshippers of Baal, but they went over the cover of being Jewish. Now, it's not going to be an anti-Semitic thing. I'm just going over how that history kind of worked out. And the Khazarians at that time, this is during the Middle Ages, had a lot of run-ins with the Russians at this point. I think it was actually known as the Kievan Rus at the time. And they basically were saying, stop your horrific ritual sacrifices and all these other things you were doing, or we will come and conquer you. Lo and behold, of course, they wouldn't stop their actions, and eventually the Russians did, or the Kievan Rus did eventually go over there, and they did eventually quash them. And then what happened was that the Khazarians eventually, they split off and they left. Some went into Europe, eventually assuming the role of Ashkenazi. There is one group in Europe, a German group.
And they took all their rituals with them.
Exactly.
Especially, and that's why we see, especially, and it hasn't died out or anything, because
they just exist.
Germany, we can see the same type of rituals playing. It's actually one of the other homes of the same type of swampy type, rituals, as you will.
Yes, exactly. That's where, and I remember it was in Bavaria, which is part of Germany, where the Illuminati originally formed. 1776 in Germany, Bavaria, is where the Illuminati was originally formed. And then beside Europe, you had what happened in the East. Some of them went into the steppes during the time of the Turkic expansion. After a lot of them were kicked out of the Middle East, they went over into the steppes to deal with Mongolia and the former Khanates.
Yeah, and that's what they infiltrated, even the China area.
Yep.
And they infiltrated that, and that's why we see a lot of the same thing even now, which is even more obvious nowadays, that which was formed eventually as the Chinese Communist Party, and they're still doing the same rituals and the same stuff. This is eons later on, but still, I mean, it all worked its way up to that, in its raw old days form. It was only biblically recognizable, but as we're seeing it now, it's taken like a different form, but yet it's still the same. A lot of the underlying tones are the same, but they don't let us see that straight up front.
Mm-hmm. So that's why when you hear Kazakhstan, I immediately jump to Khazarian, because they're spelled. It's not a matter of because what happens is that the pronunciation changes, but the spelling is very similar. It's like saying like potato, potato, tomato. it's going to be pronounced differently depending on where you are, but it's spelled the same.
Yeah.
So a lot of those things eventually merged into Kazakhstan, which obviously remember at that after the turn of the 20th century, Kazakhstan was part of the USSR. Communism reigned over there until the 90s, and where we have modern day Kazakhstan. And remember, Kazakhstan is also where the world's oldest cosmodrome is, which is a space.
Wow. Yeah.
Sport, kind of like Yuri Gagarin.
I think we lost you there. I think we lost you. You might want to rewind back a couple of sentences. You went mute for a second.
What did I miss?
You were just explaining about how the spelling has changed, but it's still the same. You might want to go right after that.
Oh yeah, okay. So like I was saying, Kazakhstan is the home of the original of the first cosmodrome, which is like how in the United States we have Kennedy Space Center. The cosmodrome was what the Soviet Union were using to launch the cosmodrome.
They were known as sacrifice machines.
Not into space, and it was in that cosmodrome in Kazakhstan where they launched Yuri Gagarin into space, who has the title of first man in space.
Yeah.
So,
but also the missiles as well.
Yep.
I mean,
missiles and Sputnik, I believe, was launched from there too. So a lot of the space, the deep state space stuff happens over there.
Yeah.
That's why when you see a lot of people talking about, oh, Kazakhstan just fell and their sultana is now in flames and the military is now helping the people. That's huge when you actually understand the historical significance of that place. I mean,
all the suffering they did and all the power that they had endured all that time.
Yeah. Now you have the military working with the people to round up the corrupt politicians and government officials and bankers, and we're seeing a cleansing of that area. And in the whole 5D chess world, if you will, this is essentially the deep state's way of losing a queen. Yep. They have lost their most powerful piece in their entire chessboard with the fall of with all the things that are happening in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
This was supposed to, because nobody ever talks about that country. It's always thought of as just a third world backwater country in the middle of the steppes of Asia. No one talks about it. Not true. It is a very, 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 very essential place when it comes to resources and information.
Yes, and when it falls, that's, it's almost like having a whole bunch of, I guess it's a whole bunch of ropes holding something together, anchoring something down. And when we're talking about anchoring the people down metaphorically, so, some of the ropes are thick and some of them are thin. This is a very, very, very thick rope that just got cut. So,
and to use another analogy, it's like talking about baseball, right? And it's one thing to get a home run. This is like getting a grand slam. You have all bases are the bases are loaded, and the person just hit a home run. We're talking about a grand slam hit right here with all the things that they're connected with: Bitcoin, with precious metals, with raw materials, with everything.
And for the people, it's gonna feel a little weird because most of them have been under a very ruling thumb, if you will, and an iron fist. So it'll be interesting to see how the people handle this, having their curtains drawn for a change and seeing sunlight for a change and something called freedom.
Especially when you consider a lot. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, because they're not used to that, and a lot of times when it's like when you see an animal chained up, all their life, and you finally open the fence, take the chain off. They don't always know what to do with it at first. They don't
Mhm.
always run at first. They don't know what to do with their freedom. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but that will be the first thing. When this happens, it does instigate these things to happen all over the world, and it is happening in many other countries. People are,
Mhm.
getting their ropes cut, their chains broken off, and be able to taste freedom. And some of the countries are going to take longer than others, but
Yeah,
it will happen.
exactly. I mean, and you also have to consider a lot of the politicians that were in control and the president of Kazakhstan, who a lot of these people are all the way out now. A lot of them were holdovers from the USSR. They may probably don't, they weren't using communism as their political status anymore, but that's what they were part of at one time, no more than 30 years ago. So it's just a different name. But as we were saying about birds and flocks before,
Yeah.
you know, they just changed the name because the Soviet Union disappeared. Doesn't mean the individual is going to have all of a sudden change their ideology. Yeah.
Well, they do that throughout history everywhere. They
Uh
would
huh.
change that. They would change the name. We would say different names, same sank.
Hmm.
It would be,
But
it's also their way of hiding themselves because
yep.
if you change your name, you kind of make it look like you disappeared. You're not around anymore. This is something different.
And that's what's wonderful about this time, this day and age, is that um, going underground and hiding doesn't work as well as it used to. There was a time where you could do that no problem, but nowadays a lot of these things are now being uh, the curtains are opening up for all to see, and it's just a matter of people actually paying attention now.
And that's what
Yep.
it means to be woken up. But it also, thankfully, there are a lot of whistleblowers, a lot more than there were back then. People are
Hmm.
braving up who have been in the middle of the circle are starting to open their mouths. Some of them go as far as singing like birds.
What does a bird do when they're caged? They start singing.
Shit
Uh,
in it.
well, another nice thing is that before, you know, there was a lot of silencing. People would all of a sudden go missing. We're seeing that less and less now. Where you have a lot of doctors and a lot of former politicians or a lot of business people who are now speaking out about all these things happening all over the world. And you know,
And it's just like a hole coming with all kinds of cracks and leaks. You're running out of fingers and toes to plug it in. What are you gonna do? So
uh,
the dam is breaking and it's all over the world. It's not just in one country, it's not in one area, and the rest of the world is good to go. It's happening all over the planet, the entire planet, both top surface side and underground. All of that has happened. Everything from the sacrifices to missing people to the control of the people to control of everything. The grip is getting less and less tight, and eventually it will be all let go. And it's going to feel weird at first because we're not used to having this much freedom. We're used to being told what to do and we just obey it. And now we're
mhm.
starting to wake up and realizing we don't have to be this way. The whole world can have the same privilege. It's something called freedom, freedom of your own thought, and freedom of your own will of what you want to do with your life.
Well, not just freedom, but liberty. Some
Yep.
places have never had the idea of actual liberty. They're so used to having a totalitarian or a um, totalitarian or authoritarian regime that all of a sudden they have this thing called freedom and liberty. What is that? It's going to be very weird and unfamiliar for a lot of people. And we have to look at this not just here, like the United States or Canada or Mexico or Europe. We're talking about the entire world. You know, all peoples everywhere
And
are
that's what
all
you need as
witnessing this.
conspiracy theorists. That's call it a we're more realist, but you know, um, that's what we're all here for. That's what will be our big job, because most people are going to go, can I have this? Can I do that? And we're like, you don't need to ask anymore. You don't need to ask
Just do it.
permission. You think, yes, do it. Think for yourself.
Do it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, just do it. If you need my help, I'll be there for you, but you don't have to. You don't have to ask permission too much anymore. You just
Yeah.
do. And that's the funny thing, is that everyone asks about what a great awakening for the world look like. Well, guess what? This is what it looks like. And it looks terrifying. I know. We have, the old guard is trying to crank and really crack down on things. It's really hard. But you know what? The only time you crack down on things is when you start losing control, not when you have control.
Yeah.
When you have control, there's no reason to do anything because it's just accepted. That time is over.
That's how you know. That's how you know. It's what they say in Mary Poppins, go fly a kite. If you feel like going to fly a kite today, go for it. There should be no one stopping you.
First, I think Gandhi, had the best quote when it came to this, which is, first they ignore you, then they make fun of you, then they fight you, then you win.
Yeah.
And what has happened? First they ignored you, and then they're like, "Oh, crazy conspiracy theories! Oh, crazy person! Why would you have such thoughts?" And then they got to fight you. You better do what we tell you. How dare you think about that? We're going to have to lock you down, or we're going to throw you into a cold cell. But what happens after that? They're out of options at that point. You win.
Yeah.
Checkmate.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Once they run out of things they can take away from you, then they can't do anything. What can they do? That's the last thing that they can do, is lock you up. That's really the worst they can do. I mean, a lot of it has gone as far as killing, but it's not going to get too far once they realize why.
Not when you have billions and billions and billions of people who are all waking up at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And some people take a little bit longer than others. Some people, it's like it just starts up no problem. Other people, they're going to have a little tinkering to do. They're going to they're going to get, most people will get around and they get wise to things eventually.
There will unfortunately be some people that will never wake up. Their brains just can't handle it. Their spirit can't handle it. May not be in their soul contract to handle it.
But that's okay. That's
Yeah.
fine. Not no one's perfect, and not everybody is going to achieve the same exact things. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. So, any last thoughts, Sue, before we wrap up things tonight?
Well, I just thought I'd actually tell a little quick story about what I had to deal with. And this goes back to what we were talking about. But we had a theater here in St. Louis. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. And we had a theater here called the Fox Theater. And we wanted to go see the play called Cats about a month ago. We ordered tickets. And we had no idea that they wanted us to have the Vax card, because when we first called them and asked them, they said that's not needed. The only thing you're going to need is to wear a mask. And I said, okay, well, we'll just deal with that. So I mean, just wearing the face diaper is not that big a deal. We'll just deal with it, but we wanted to see a play for my youngest daughter's birthday. And when we got there a month later, on the day of their show, they said that we cannot see it unless we have the Vax card. And, we could go to a couple doors down. They had a rapid test where they swab inside your nose. And we decided we weren't going to do that either. We just didn't want to be in the middle of all that. And unfortunately, my youngest was a little downhearted about it and sad, but she actually stayed in pretty good spirits overall. We actually found some other activity to do that day. But we ended up being on the front lines of this whole thing, and I was just watching people um just happily handing over their Vax card in order to eat at the restaurant that was attached to the theater, and also hand over the Vax card to go into the theater itself. And in order for us to get our tickets, we had to show a Vax card, and we didn't have any of that either. So we just decided to do something else. But it was really sad just to watch how people just the way they hand it over like it's the new norm.
All I gotta say is papers, please.
Yeah, and that was it.
That's, yeah,
And
it's sad.
and it's really sad how it's gone. And that's how they boil a fog. How do you boil fog? Slowly. And it's just that slowly these things are happening one by one. They take a little bit of your freedom away, just a little bit at a time, and every time it becomes the new norm. And here's the funny thing: humans are extremely adaptable. When something's a shocker, it's everything that goes on can be a shocker at first, but it becomes the new norm eventually. I mean, seriously, if you went straight from no mask to all of a sudden wearing a mask in society every single day, you know, that would be a shocker. But if you slowly, just a little bit at a time, make it normal, then all of a sudden it just becomes normal. And same thing now with the card. And so the C19 card is just absolutely everywhere here in St. Louis. A majority of businesses are doing it, especially entertainment venues and restaurants.
And think about it. We have children who are now being born who have never seen a world without this. They
Yeah.
weren't alive in 2017 or 2018, where this was not the case at all. Back then, there was none of this.
Well, it's really
Uh,
sad to see that really, really young kids that are starting to wear those masks, face diapers, and everything. Um, they're actually liking it. They're actually fine with it. Their parents
yeah,
are asleep and they're wearing it all the time. They're wearing it all the time. It's the same as putting sunglasses on when it's sunny out and stuff like that. You know, um, they're it's going to be an absolute shock to them to live in a world when eventually this goes away. It would be
it,
interesting to reprogram the kids and say, look, you don't have to wear this stuff. You don't have to have these things done to you. So it'll be interesting.
should be interesting.
I'm grateful that my daughter was born at a time when this stuff wasn't normal yet. So, and we're letting her live a normal life as normal as possible. I'm not going to let her play into all of this.
You mean the actual normal, not this new normal.
Yeah, it's the actual old normal.
The one where you didn't have to do all these things because most people knew, that stuff was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And if anybody actually wants to know how old this idea is, go look up the Denver murals. There's a mural with everyone wearing, it's all the kids, and it shows all the countries, all of them wearing a mask. So you can look up the Denver airport murals and look at the date of when that mural was made. So it's old news and they were expecting it.
I mean, you could also go into the London Olympic Games and how they were doing the displays over there. So this stuff it was known for a while. It just, this could have been, I know a lot of people might be like, oh, this is terrible. Well, yes, it's terrible, but it could have been far worse.
Yeah.
Far worse.
There's a lot of benevolent forces out there that are helping it to be toned down. And hopefully it won't go too much further, but we know that we still have some work to do.
Of course, there's always going to be work to be done, but it's always good to know that some of the stuff was blunted as much as it was. This was supposed to go on for many, many more years, but I don't see this going on for much longer.
Yeah, same here.
All right, Sue. Shall we wrap up for this evening?
Absolutely.
All righty. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure entertaining you guys for about the last hour or so.
And we'd like to thank Katie, and we'd like to thank Katie we couldn't be here without her, and like thank iEvolveTV, and we also love to thank Clavy Clothesline.
Always got to thank all the wonderful people and wonderful places and things that have been brought us to this place right now. So we thank every single one of those people and things.
And we wouldn't be here with all of you guys, so thank you for watching.
Thanks again, guys. Always a wonderful. Happy New Year. We'll see you guys next week. Have a good one. Bye now.